The possibility that Christmas might be cancelled.
But Christmas is not going to be normal. There's absolutely no question about that.
And they're not going to be able to have a big party that perhaps they would have been hoping for.
5 households gathering together, and it's a recipe for disaster, I'm afraid.
Das alles hat natürlich Auswirkungen auf die Feiertage, das wissen wir. Aber wir sind zum Handeln gezwungen und handeln jetzt auch.
The Christmas season will be cancelled.
You can't do that.
I think what I said was correct, but Christmas isn't cancelled. I mean, given my faith, I mean, you can't cancel Christmas. It's impossible. No, even the First Minister can't cancel Christmas.
Now we're talking sense, big guy. Shops closed, carol singing, band in church, rules about who you can and who you can't eat your turkey with. If you'd have said to someone last Christmas that this year would look like that, they'd have thought you were crazy. Now this year, as we've looked on at the exercise of power from world governments, passing guidelines and laws as they attempt to keep their citizens safe, many of us will have felt powerless. Some will have been fully in favour of each set of restrictions. Others will have had a growing difficulty accepting the next measure. It's a Christmas with an unusual level of power being wielded over people. But it's a Christmas not unlike the first Christmas. In Luke's account of that first Christmas, we meet the government, Caesar Augustus, and he is seriously powerful. Big kingdom, massive empire. Lockdown has seen us order more and more from our armchair, just at the click of a button, whether it's a pizza or presents or a new radiator or two. But this guy, he could order an entire continent to move from one place to another. The opposite, I guess, of our stay-at-home instructions. They're told to move. It didn't matter if your fiancée was pregnant or if you had 60 miles to travel on a donkey, you had to go. Here's a government infringing on people's lives, ruining their plans. But little does Caesar know that actually he's signing off on the plans of God. Over Caesar's decree, our eternal King is fulfilling his decree. That long-promised Saviour would be born in Bethlehem. We need to be aware that there is one above all earthly powers. It's fair to say that this year has been pretty turbulent. Ups and downs, upheavals in school, working from home, cancellation of exams, this set of grades going in one direction, then change to that set of grades in another direction, then back to school, and then friends having to isolate, maybe you having to isolate, then more exams are cancelled. Maybe you arrived at university straight into lockdown in halls. Stay at home. Don't go home. It's easy to feel despair on one hand, isn't it? But on the other hand, we can put too much hope in the government to fix the world. Have you noticed that as we turned away from God as our Saviour, we've increasingly turned towards politics and power as that source of hope? If we can just get the right people to the right places of power, the world will be saved from its madness. But even the setting for this ancient government's power unfolding tells of a greater power, a greater prestige. You see, Bethlehem is where the prophet Micah, hundreds of years before, predicted that the Messiah, the Saviour King, would be born. Bethlehem is also the town of King David, who was the most important king in all of Israel's history. David was given a promise that God would raise up a king from his family line, whose kingdom would then reign and last forever and ever. This is the government that the world ultimately needs. This baby Jesus. The baby is that king. When we think about the idea that the government can cancel Christmas, what we really mean is the familiar things with familiar people in familiar places. As Professor Leach says, you can't cancel Christmas. God coming into the world, a baby born in a manger, born as a king, whose kingdom will never ever end, to rescue his people. It won't be the Christmas we once knew. But you can't cancel Christmas.
You can't cancel Christmas. It's impossible. You can't cancel Christmas. It's impossible.
A mate of mine, Ben Cutting, some of you might know his brother Dan of DC Freestyle. Ben has produced this video which captures beautifully the feelings we might have about Christmas this year, but that the greater hope that we have because of Jesus, the King. And afterwards, Edinburgh-based musician Steph MacLeod will be singing Hark the Herald Angels Sing. Catch you tomorrow as we think about the God who wouldn't socially distance himself.
Christmas 2020. It'll look different this year. But how will it fit amongst the hurt, desperately trying to bring some cheer? No Christmas markets or movie nights with friends. No carols by candlelight or Christmas parties at the weekend. We will miss out on the beautiful chaos and queuing for Santa, the pantomimes, reunions, and time with our grandmas. FaceTime and Zoom will give us some Christmas connection, but when the end call button is pressed, it's a time of reflection. From all that we had and all that we came from, you see there is genuine pain on all that we're missing out on. And if we're honest, Christmas 2020 just reminds us of everything we've lost this year. Hugs with families, road trips, weddings, and yet something about this time changes the atmosphere. Hope, hold on, pain ends. Like the changing of a tide, the promise of new life, and the prayers that one day this will all be alright. And it will. But how do I know? You see, because the Bible tells me so. To be with those you love on Christmas is a real privilege and a joy. But for me, real hope came at Christmas in the form of a baby boy. A God who looked at us on earth and wanted us back, sent his one and only Son to serve us and to get us on track. You see, we were made for so much more than this. And if anything, this year has wiped out all that we once called bliss. What started at Christmas then leads to a cross, but it isn't over there or we all would have lost. The story doesn't end when death comes along. It isn't over yet. Nothing's lost. Nothing's gone. You see, we long for something more because it's embedded in our hearts. And 3 days after death, Jesus comes back to restore what was apart. Restores it all. You and God can have relationship again. And Christmas is a reminder that Jesus is here with you, walking in your pain. So to Christmas 2020, you can take our parties, our markets, our movie nights and our mood, but you cannot take our hope because it's not put in the lights, the tree or the food. My hope is in something solid and somebody I can trust. My hope is in Jesus, who at Christmas came to save us.
The herald angels sing, glory to the newborn King. Peace on earth and mercy mild, God and sinners reconciled. Joyful all ye nations rise, join the triumph of the skies. With angelic hosts proclaim, Christ is born in Bethlehem. Hark the herald angels sing, glory to the newborn King. Christ by high is heaven adored, Christ the Godhead see. Hail the incarnate deity, pleased as man with man to dwell. Jesus our Emmanuel. Hark the herald angels sing, glory to the newborn King. The newborn King. Hail the heaven-born Prince of Peace. Hail the Son of Righteousness. Light and life to all he brings.